that plus my son. So
Oh, Mickey.
Mickey, is that what you call him? Well, let's get this thing started. Damien, you want to read first or let your readers read first?
I'd like to hear what they've got to say. Um,
You're up.
all right. Francine, would you be ready to start us off? All right. Well, very cool. I'm really excited by both of the folks that were able to join me here tonight reading at F-Bomb, and big thanks to Paul for putting this together and so consistently. As somebody who runs a reading series, I know how much work is involved, so I want to really just salute Paul for all this hard work over a long period of time. It's very admirable and wonderful service to the literary community, and particularly to Flash. So we've got Francine Witt and Pedro Ponce. Francine is the author of the poetry chapbooks Not Only, First Rain, which was the winner of the Pecan Grove Press competition, and the Flash chapbooks Cold June, selected by Robert Owen Butler as the winner of the Thomas Wilhelmus Award. Wilhelmus Award, sorry, and the Wind Twirls Everything. Her poetry chapbook won Not All Fires Burn the Same, won the Slipstream Chapbook Contest, and as I'm sure we all know, she lives and writes in New York City.
Well, thank you, Damien, and for inviting me to be one of your readers. I'm very honored because I've long been an admirer of yours. So, I will read a few pieces. This is called In a Providence Motel. He told her he had news and let's get away to Rhode Island. He told her he wanted the news to be separate from the rest of their lives. They took the train and checked into a papery motel. They sat all night, mildew and floral bedspread, her waiting and him nodding and close to speech. The morning light through the curtains fell across his face in a way that made him almost young. How he looked when she still loved him. I'm dying, he finally said when the air would hold no more silence. She sipped the last of the drugstore wine. We all are, she said. Yes, but I really am, he said, something growing in my chest. Her mouth almost forming into I'm sorry. She never knew any more what was true. She looked at the empty plastic cup and wished it were filled with coffee. Through the thin wall, the grunts of an early morning couple, she wondered if that's how he sounded when he slept with her sister. She looked again at the plastic cup and realized it would split open if it were filled with hot coffee. She looked at her husband, who still looked young and lovable in the morning light, which is almost always a terrible liar. This is called
Really great.
Snout Face. Not now, but soon I will be leaving Busby. Busby, whose eyes are dark marbles, whose eyes don't meet mine anymore. His face is long like a bear face, his mouth wide and gaping like he could swallow a salmon whole. Soon it will be the barren season, dry and famine, like a town up north where starving polar bears invade, just clumping down Main Street, nosing into garbage cans, and the people adjust by leaving their car doors open for pedestrians to dive into. No one blames a bear for being a bear, and so I can't blame Busby for being Busby. I knew he was snort and prowl when I met him. Now, I leave my heart open so he can dive in any time, like when he's lost another job because his boss was a dick or some other Busby logic. But soon, not now, not today, I will get tired of it all. Get tired of being flipped and flapped in Busby's snout mouth. I will restart myself in forage mode, adapt myself for a long, hungry winter, curl up in the hand of my own hungry heart. Balance. My father was 20 feet tall, so there's that. My mother built him a special house in the backyard. She had to cut away all the trees. Life is balance, she would say. Good days, bad days. It's still your life. Don't scrunch up your nose at not one part of it. My father would stick his huge hand, the size of a couch cushion, through the window at mealtime, and my mother would load it up with plates of bacon or hot dogs or chops. He'd blow her a kiss and take the food back to his house in our treeless yard. The hardest part, my mother said, was that this was the only time she saw him anymore. He didn't fit in our house, and her going to my father's house in the backyard only reminded her of her favorite trees. Soon the other women showed up, lines of them, all of them having heard about my 20-foot father, all of them curious about, well, you know. My father didn't worry. My mother didn't worry. She would sit in a rocking chair on the front porch. She would sit there except for mealtime when my father would show up again. She would sit there and rock back and forth in the balance of love, then not love, then love. Thank you. My mama wanted a zebra, but all she got was a stupid cow. So there she stands in the backyard, paintbrush in hand. Gotta make the best of things, she is muttering. She stripes white paint on the side of the cow, the sirloin side, the part of a cow I have eaten hamburgers from. The cow turns its still cow head to her as if to say, paint me all you want, I'm still gonna moo and give milk. Mama hears this cow thought loud and clear. She puts down the paintbrush and walks around to face the cow head on. Look, she says out loud to the cow, I could tell you stories of how pretty I was born. You can't see it anymore. And then she says, there was music in my fingers. That also got leaked out. Mama gives up and goes back to painting. You just got to give some things time, she is muttering. She decides that if all else fails, she will just take off her dress and show the cow the stripes that are painted on her own side. The we part. At first, we didn't know it was a gunshot. We being me, as Nathan was actually asleep, which actually is most of the time. The street below our apartment is filled with people even at 2 a.m. Nathan says we shouldn't have moved in above a bar. I think he meant we shouldn't have moved in, but the me part of we won out saying it was a good commute to work. Somehow I thought that might help things. It didn't. I don't think we've had one good night together since we lived here, and the me part of we hasn't slept for 10 whole minutes in a row. The Nathan part of we comes home and doses himself with a melatonin cough syrup combo. Insists it's to block out the noise from the bar. Another bang or boom or whatever. Most nights, the me part of we tries not to hear the breaking glass, the fuck you mans, the throat clear of the constant Harleys. Most nights, I sit up watching Nathan. He is REM sleeping, his eyelids all jumpy, maybe the only part of him that moves anymore when I'm around. Don't you hear all that noise, Nathan? The me part of we is asking. I pretend he is stroking my hair. Shh, I love you, he is saying. The me part of we wonders what to do about the noise outside. What's the best thing to do with a gunshot? Do you run towards it or away? The me part of we wonders the same thing about love. Nathan is lying there, snoring up the night like a chainsaw, like a motorcycle, like a man who is ignoring me. All of those things more danger than a gun. I look out the window to the street below, light swirl of cop cars and a shot man on the ground. Woman in handcuffs. I love you, she says as they lead her away. Love kills again. I look back at Nathan, drifting and distant and not any part of we anymore. Quiet now, quiet enough to close my eyes. The only sound is Nathan snoring, the buzz of it cutting a hole just big enough for me to crawl out of. And I have one more. Thank you. Well been lovely. Wolf. One day, love is saying, enough is enough, and so it is. Both of you listen, move to other zip codes. If you could, you'd move to Mars. But hey, love is a fickle girl, and so she changes her mind, says you belong together, and so it is again. You move back in, you bump into the couch he bought, he spills gravy on your rug, you move back and forth like a Ouija board, and then you see it clear. He smiles too long at the waitress. You are looking too long at the door. You both clink your glasses to being apart after all. You realize it's better that way. You realize too that love is not a girl, but more of a fangy wolf. From now on, you will sit back and watch it lick its chops. You will wait till it gives up and leaves. Thank you very much.
Wow, thank you, Francine. That was wonderful work. I love the voice in your pieces. It's so impactful. Mostly I'm thinking I'm really stupid. I should have gotten. I'm realizing now I should have picked terrible writers. I said I like picked two of the best writers I know. Is that boy am I dumb? Uh, Gosh, I'll never learn. So our second feature tonight is Pedro Ponce. He's the author of The Devil and the Dairy Princess, winner of the Don Belton Fiction Prize, and a finalist for the 2001 Big Other Book Award. Pedro's work has appeared in Plowshares, Copper, Nickel, Witness, and other journals, also been anthologized in the Best Small Fictions and New Micro, exceptionally short fiction. He teaches writing and literary studies at St. Lawrence University. Put your hands together.
Thank you so much, Damien. Can everyone hear me okay? Okay, thank you. So I am going to read an excerpt from the first story in The Devil and the Dairy Princess. It's a collage story made up of arguably flashes that sort of turn into a longer story. It's based on the art of Giorgio de Chirico, who's one of my favorite painters. And the first, it's basically a series of little pieces that make up a mosaic that is intended to work like a de Chirico painting. Arcade. One does not enter so much as encounter the Piazza de Chirico. We are roused by a strange conjunction of statuary and architecture, the head of a horse emerging from an archway, a supine nymph fanned by the spray of a fountain, the face of a clock emerging like a querulous moon from behind the leaves of an artichoke. We avoid the arcade if we have somewhere pressing to be. One moment, traffic harangues us as we hazard a crowded crosswalk. The next, we turn onto a vacancy of cobbles, lined by archways receding far into the distance. If we follow our instincts, which in the interests of propriety we mostly ignore, we pocket digital porters, ignore the ringtones of concerned friends, or fretful dates, and set off in the direction of diminishing columns. We are never alone in our fecklessness. Scattered like tribute at the base of pedestals are abandoned briefcases, purses, grocery bags, and bulging totes, which never claimed are discarded or collect dust on the shelves of the lost and found. Kiosk. The piazza is not our most popular attraction. We are better known for our rustic quarter, which preserves the picturesque simplicity of another age, down to the elaborate glass fixtures that crown street lamps. The Menagerie District is considered more family-friendly, the Natural History Museum more edifying, the Botanical Preserve more picturesque, the Imperial Falls more sublime. The piazza's proximity to the train station was intended to attract visitors with its convenient location. Despite the efforts of our Chamber of Commerce, attendance remains low. Brochures are careful to describe the park's distinct atmosphere as contemplative rather than desolate, its disorienting vistas a trick of design. Complaints nevertheless accumulate at the feedback kiosk, so many that piazza volunteers have been overwhelmed and replaced by boxes that by the end of a given week are packed with scrawled survey forms, their corners waving from crammed slots like flags raised in surrender. Enigma. Regardless of how many times we wander the piazza, new vistas always reveal themselves. The mannequin grove lures us inward, limbs beckoning as if for partners in a dance. We traverse a series of deserted squares joined at corners that widen at our approach. The squares seem to rise acutely in our path, an optical illusion. Still, we are exhausted by the time we reach the furthest colonnade. The clock that marked our entrance is unreadable from this distance, where we pause to catch our breath. In haste to retrace our steps, we almost miss the limbs of mannequins emerging from a nearby niche. They are posed exactly as they were where we began. Beyond the nearer brush, we hear the familiar chuff of delivery trucks, the cloying of chapel bells. We follow the noise to our point of origin, the same pavement traced by wind-blown refuse, the same awnings limp with rain. Ariadne. Critics of the piazza are a small but vocal minority. Our election cycles invariably begin with weekly editorials calling for its redesign or demolition. Campaign buttons feature the iconic figure of Ariadne, who occupies the piazza's central square, her bare breasts obscured by a censor's opaque sash. Her profile is framed by slogans admonishing us to reclaim the moral fiber of our community. Despite this, no prevailing candidate has ever attempted to legislate the piazza's closure. Ferry. Those who defend the piazza extol its cunning design. Kaleidoscopic perspectives are created by the deft placement of stationary structures without the mechanical gimmickry employed by theme parks and other amusement franchises. Rumors persist, however, of hidden machinery, if not present from inception, then recently annexed in a desperate bid to swell flagging attendance. Silhouettes appear and vanish from windows and colonnades. Shadows gather and extend with little conformity to the natural paths of sunlight. Sails swell incongruously against the sides of tenements. We are dared to trace the trick to its source and end the mystery once and for all. We nod in determined complicity before discreetly changing the subject, unsure of what perturbs us more, the revelation of gears and levers on a waiting ferry poised the revelation of gears and levers or a waiting ferry poised on the shores of a nameless sea. Voyage. We are a landlocked city. What we lack in venturesome terrain and romantic vistas, however, is offset by the values distilled from our native topography, integrity, moderation, forthrightness. We are consistently voted most navigable by the major travel magazines. Our streets map themselves in seamless grids on the memories of newcomers. Those seeking more variety can enjoy the man-made marvels of the Canal District or the natural wonders stimulated twice daily at the Museum of Virtual Knowledge. We emerge to pristine food courts, our sleeves damp from rainforest dew or whitewater falls, the pavement at our feet rendered jagged by the scrim of stereo lenses. Eyes readjust to the unmediated taupe of bus shelters and city squares streaked in neon. We stutter homeward, blinking in the glare. Thank you.
Mr. Pedro. Damien Drezick is the author of the novel 40 Patchtown. Bottom Dog Press, and the award-winning Flash collection, Fables of the Deconstruction, Clash Books. His writing has appeared in more than 70 literary journals and anthologies, including W. Norton's New Micro, Electric Literature, Post Road, New Orleans Review, Cleaver, Cutbank, Smoke One Quarterly, and New World Writing. A Blue Mountain residency fellow, Dresik is the winner of the Harriet Aronow Award and the Jesse Stewart Prize. He co-hosts Wanna Live, a largely virtual reading series that brings some of the best Appalachian writers to the world. Damien also serves as editor-in-chief for the journal Appalachian Lit.
Well, thank you, Paul. And thank you, Pedro. As somebody who hosts this series, we often, and we chat with the writers at the end, and try and come up with, sort of nuanced, hopefully insightful critique. And after hearing that, I think what I've got to say is, God damn, that's good writing. That's my nuanced and wow, that was just awesome. Jeez, I'm gonna order that book as soon as I'm done reading here. I can't wait. This is wonderful work. Thanks both Pedro and Francine for joining. It was lovely to hear your work. Thank you. So I'm going to read from this collection, Fables of the Deconstruction. I very rarely make guarantees about my work, but I guarantee that well, this is going to be, Cocaine Bear notwithstanding, this is going to be the best book that you purchase this year that will feature a bear addicted to drugs. I think so. This is a story called The Fungible Trajectories of Carol. And I'm grateful for the opportunity to read it because I've been taking my teenage daughter to a lot of my readings as more or less a single parent. And so I don't ever read this story. The Fungible Trajectories of Carol. In her late 30s, and attractive, Carol uses sex. Belonging to 15 internet dating apps and employing more than 25 screen names, she has been meeting for sex with as many as 6 different men, sometimes 2 before lunch each day. Missionary, girl on top, doggy, Carol is ambivalent. She is motivated in this only by quantity and novelty of partner. Carol's employment of sex serves at this point a broad array of purposes: mood enhancement, self-congratulation, nourishment, sustenance, comfort, as a reason to punish herself, as the punishment, to add drama to what is otherwise a dull life, to feel desired, needed, loved. As a freelance writer living in a major metropolitan area, Carol's schedule and surroundings not uncomfortably allow this kind of behavior. As a lapsing Catholic and someone who is reasonably concerned about the contraction of STDs, her ethics and health concerns do their best to rein it in. As Americans, plunged into this recounting in the opening decades of the 21st century, we will probably not be comfortable with this going on too much longer, as Carol's bad behavior began approximately 3 months ago, on the heels of her breaking things off with her fiancé. We can likely abide this acting out only for a few more weeks, a month at most. So where do things go from here? If, at gunpoint, you would announce yourself a political liberal, try ending A. If, on the other hand, you would consider yourself a political conservative, try ending B. If you have no distinct political beliefs, there are probably better uses to be made of your time than a careful read of this story. Please skip to the end. A. Following a pregnancy scare, Carol sees the error of her ways and sets up an appointment at a counseling center. After being diagnosed with hypersexual hypomania, Carol is prescribed a 5 milligram dose of a powerful mood stabilizer and spends several difficult months in therapy, where she does her best to work out issues involving her self-esteem, her relationship with her father, and the meaning of interactions with men in general. After a fusillade of false breakthroughs, Carol eventually comes to understand that her body chemistry predisposes her to react to stress by seeking out even more stress. Terming this Carol's fucked up law of relativity, she enrolls in an MFA program well respected for its competencies in creative nonfiction, where she writes and revises her best-selling memoir, My Life as a Slut. B. After a condom breaks, while Carol engages in a threesome at the Holiday Inn, she contracts HIV. Due to her habits and lack of self-control, she spreads the disease to 2 more men before the results of her tests come back from the free clinic at Planned Parenthood. Upon learning that she is responsible for the men's illnesses, Carol's guilt rules her life like an absolutist monarch. She becomes dangerously depressed and takes to blowing what little freelance money she is still capable of earning on binge drinking and crystal meth. Both of these substances dramatically reduced the effectiveness of the retroviral cocktail prescribed by her doctor. Although this matters less than one would suspect, as Carol loses her health insurance 6 months down the road and can no longer afford medicine. As her body thins dangerously, Carol maxes out her credit cards to finance a trip to Italy, where she spends her last drifting days sniffing Afghani heroin and watching the sun retreat slowly into the slate-blue Mediterranean. In many stories of this length, it's customary to withhold a crucial piece of information, a fact that makes you view the story in a wholly other light. Now, even though the multiple choice form employed in the fungible trajectories of Carol may have already come close to exhausting your readerly tolerance for innovation or gimmick, this tale is no exception. Here's the end. Carol, or her ravaged, angry ghost, depending, arrives at your flat. She may be holding a weapon, a machine pistol, perhaps, or simply clutching a cup of very hot tea. But what is non-negotiable is her demand that you explain to her satisfaction and the very best of your ability, your rationale for answering as you did. And until you do, there isn't even the slightest chance she's going anywhere. Thank you. This is a story called Another Night with Jim. Tonight, you're working again with Jim, and that's something about which it's hard to be happy. It's not so much his reactionary politics, or that he's often late to the mid-rise building where you both work as janitors. It's not even that Jim occasionally forgets to swirl the toxic bleaching chemical in an alarming number of urinals, forcing Birthhound, your imperious Albanian boss, to demand you take up the slack. No. The reason it's hard to work with Jim is because he's a grizzly bear. 9.5 feet tall and maybe 1,200 pounds, Jim towers over, well, everything. Mops, vacuum cleaners, the rotating marble polisher you take turns sliding across the lobby's checkerboard patterned floor, all are dwarfed in his massive paws. Wrapped in his prickly pelt, Jim gripes and bitches his way through shift after endless shift, depleting the vending machines mercilessly and foraging loudly through the legal secretary's desks for protein bars. You can't say there haven't been some good times, like when he got you and your girlfriend free tickets to see him ride the unicycle at the county fair, or the currency of his information on where to get the freshest honey. But on the whole, Jim's been a challenging coworker at best. Last spring's infamous basketball argument, for example, in which your support for Bill Russell over Hakeem Olajuwon as the best center to ever hit the hardwood resulted in Jim rearing onto his hind legs and tossing a floor model photocopier across the conference room at your head, destroying several pieces of pricey designer office furniture in the bargain. Tonight, however, when you arrive, after having done your best to psych yourself up for another evening of cleaning toilets, wiping down desks, and disposing of various accountant and lawyer trash, Jim is nowhere to be found. Not that Jim hasn't had trouble at work before. Last summer, he was really down on himself for eating all the chocolate from the building's reception area instead of foraging for nuts and berries. And it's hard to count the number of times he's missed half a shift, futilely hunting for spawning salmon in the small stream that bisects the office park. It's Birthhound, however, who finally clues you in that Jim is hiding upstairs in the secret hallway that leads to the freight elevator. Is it the hunters again, you wonder? Or is Jim expecting another visit from the animal rights people who want to sedate him and fly him by helicopter to a remote region of Minnesota where he will never again be able to watch his beloved Houston Rockets and instead be forced to listen to that nightmarish flattened O every time someone says the word cola? But when you do eventually locate a shaking Jim cowering behind a dumpster, he tells you that due to substantial debts, it's actually Manny he's avoiding. His connection for the extra strong methamphetamines he's been injecting since early November to avoid hibernation and its attendant weight gain, not to mention squandering his carefully hoarded stash of sick, personal, and vacation days. Thanks. Thank you. I grew up in the suburbs, but not these. It's called Life Lesson. It's 1972, and the war, unpopular now, even in the suburbs, sputters on. My father, not a Buddhist monk, nonetheless flirts with self-immolation. Slumped on our blacktop drive, next to the roadmaster, he's poured a quart of Fleshman's gin down the front of his chest. His left hand toys with the wheel of a Zippo. Alice! He shouts to my mother. Alice, get out here! When my mom, beehive blonde and rayoned, comes rustling through the screen door, he smears some of the gin into his hair, a splash across his whiskery face. Have this baby, he tells her. I swear I will go up like Dresden. Even as my mother sprays him down with the garden hose, calls from my uncle in a house across the street, my father is laughing. I can do this any time, Alice, he says. And I'm going to end tonight with a story. Thank you. Thanks. It's a story called Cleanliness. I come home to the smell of meat. Not the subtle wafting of sirloin tips or pounded cutlets sautéing as a prelude to being served with thick sticks of asparagus, but the concentrated odor of raw meat. Pungent, sweet, overpowering, as if our front door led to the killing room of an abattoir. Briefcase still in hand, overcoat across my shoulders, like a cape. I follow the broken trail of styrofoam packaging and plastic wrap through our cramped shotgun apartment to the bathroom. Chops and shanks, roasts and ribs oxidize in a brown heap next to the space heater. My boyfriend, a firefighter who's recovering from a bad time, hunches in our cramped tub, drizzling the remains of one of the packages through his thinning hair. When I ask what has happened, he smiles beatifically up from the tub. I spent $170 at the butcher shop, he tells me. And rises nearly to the tops of his pale feet. Although wildly inappropriate, this macabre spectacle reminds me of the time my little sister Carol got her period in the pool. I am being washed in the blood of the Lamb, he tells me finally. My boyfriend is relaxed, unconcerned with my reaction. He keeps on wringing what I believe to be a shoulder chop across his hairless chest, a little below the nipples. That's a metaphor, I tell him. That means if you go to church, God will forgive your sins. Are you so sure of that? And although in 15 minutes I will call the psychiatrist, and Lewis will spend several days under observation before returning home with a Zyprexa prescription. For this one luminous moment, the way he looks up at me from his pool of watery redness, the relief etched across his face as if with numinous acid, this man I love, he makes me wonder. Thank you.
Thank you, Damien.
Thanks everybody for coming. Thank you again to Paul for all the hard work, and Francine and Pedro. It's wonderful to see so many folks.
As somebody who's new to this group, may I just say thank you very, very much. The readings were extraordinary. And the best beauty was the language that each one of you uses. It's remarkable. Thank you so much.
Next reader is Cindy Rasmus. She's originally from the Ironbound section of Newark, New Jersey. Once voted the unfriendliest city on the planet, and it shows in her writing. She is the editor/art director of the crime fiction webzine Yellow Mama. Cindy.
Thank you, Paul. Can you guys hear me?
Across the alley.
Okay. Thank you. I wrote this story as part of my Atlantic City 1972 stories, Damien. My pre-casino Atlantic City stories. And I finished it Monday and I revised it today and I just got to read it. I hope I don't go over my time. If not, if I do, just mute me, you know. Anyway, where is it? Hold on. Okay, it's called Hidey Hole. Atlantic City, 1972. Stay out of sight, Mrs. Marshall warned me. Why, I thought. Could they really be looking? Could anybody want or care about me? Here in Atlantic City, I try to disappear, hiding out at Mrs. Marshall's fortune-telling place off the boardwalk. Her old house smelled of the sea, shabby with huge dusty furniture and thick drapes, and those beaded curtains that tinkled each time she walked through them. She was so nice to let me stay. I had no money except for what Mom had kept in her hidey hole in that pink satin lingerie bag I'd love rubbing my face against, even though I hated her. And now Mom was dead. Weeks I'd been missing, if anybody cared. But because I was 14, you couldn't just disappear. They had a turban askew. When Jessie the maid screamed, the whole world came running. That guy with the creepy eyes had killed her. That's what Mrs. Marshall had predicted. Beware, she told Mom, who laughed. This guy, right? In the lobby, Mom crossed her tan legs. Said he'd been watching me for a while. She looked around like he was lurking behind the check-in desk. Pammy, I could feel his eyes on me. Pammy, my nickname when I was 4. Yeah, she squirmed in her seat. He's the one, all right. Maybe Creepy Eyes killed me too, the 14-year-old daughter. I bet that's what they thought. Thanks to those ghouls, my pop was dead too. Whoever called Pop, what they said, how they said it, made me cry all over again. They lied, Mrs. Marshall said. Told them you were both dead. Someone, she snorted, had just seen you in the lobby, alive. Howard, I thought miserably, who'd looked right through me like I really was dead. Howard, the hotel owner's son, who I still love so much, even after he dumped me for other girl guests. Your father's heart gave out, Mrs. Marshall said sadly, believing you died too. No more Pop smelling of beer and kielbasa, watery eyes too scared to meet mine or Mom's. Her lip had curled just thinking of him, those hellish months carrying his baby. You'll love him, she said he'd told her. After he's born, you'll see. Pop poured another shot. Him or her. But Mom didn't. An orphan I was now, like in those stupid Dickens books we read in school, like Oliver Twist. With Mrs. Margolis, Fagin, or crazy Miss Havisham in her rotted wedding dress. What did I really know about her? Just that she read palms and tarot cards and wore blonde flip wigs from the 60s. She had to be 70. Come to think of it, I'd never seen her eyes, because she always wore those leopard sunglasses. Still, she took me in. But to do what with me? For now, she said, stay out of sight. She pointed to a storage closet inside her fortune-telling parlor. From in there, you could watch and listen so you know how it's done. How it's done? Meaning none of it was real? Twice I was here with Mom while it was done. In the waiting room, I sat while Mrs. Marshall read Mom's palm or the cards or whatever tipped her off about Mom's creepy-eyed killer. Was he even real? Was Pop really dead? Stay out of sight. In that hidey hole, smelling of dust and incense, like in church. No canned foods like you'd expect. Mrs. Marshall never cooked. She brought us hot dogs, frozen custards from the boardwalk. What do you mean? The fat lady said. My hotline is broken. From my secret spot, I saw Mrs. Marshall smirk. What do you think that means, sweetie? As she read more of that lady's chubby palm, I crept out of the closet and out the back door. Somewhere in the boardwalk, I would find a phone. In broad daylight, I was, not out of sight. At the steeplechase pier, I heard kids screeching on rides. In the background, Alice Cooper's School's Out played. Down the boardwalk, I won't stand where Howard worked. There he was, flirting with girls that didn't stay at his father's hotel. How jealous I was. A new one Howard had now. The sea breeze blew her hair and her eyes, and gently he tucked it behind her ear, like he had done with me. Felt like years, not weeks, since that happened. Across from Howard's stand were payphones. No boots, no hidey holes. Just phones where people could see me talking, knowing that I wasn't dead like Mom. And I didn't care. I grabbed the receiver, then realized I had no change. I'd have to call collect. If Pop was alive, he would accept the charges. But if he was dead... Operator, I said when she answered. From behind me, I felt something, like I'd been stung. I brushed off my back, but nothing was there. Hello, the operator said. Reverse the charges, please. As the phone rang, I got that same sensation, like I'd been touched, but I hadn't. Not yet. Something was coming, something worse than I thought. Worse than Poppy and dead. I turned around. When I saw those eyes, I left the receiver swinging. I ran like mad back the way I'd come. In my mind, I could still see them. Eyes so black, like ground windows to a steeplechase pier in hell. A roller coaster spinning out of control, spitting out kids and screaming mommies. I ran till I couldn't anymore. Breathlessly, I looked around as if he was behind me. I didn't see him or feel his eyes on me. I trudged back to Mrs. Marshall's. Madame Marshall, her tin sign said, Psychic readings know your destiny. With a cloudy-looking eye under her name, almost like it was seen through a veil. Strange, I thought on my way inside. I'd never noticed that eye before. Never seen her eyes, period. Inside, it was too quiet. No clients in the waiting room and no voices, so Mrs. Marshall wasn't given a reading. By now, the fat ladies would have been over. Were all Mrs. Marshall readings tragic? Maybe, I thought. The heart lines could get mended. It felt late, but outside it was still light out. I wanted to call up, but was too scared. Even here, right now, this hidey hole was the safest place I knew. The beaded curtains jangled a warning. The parlor was a mess. Cards everywhere. mostly on where she lay on the floor. The little I knew about Taro, I bet one would be death. My heart raced. Like a broken doll she looked, her arms and legs splayed out, her throat all purple. She was still dressed, but with that blonde wig askew, like Mom's gold turban. The sunglasses were still on her face. Slowly I moved toward her. Beware, I heard as I reached for them. Without the sunglasses, the eyes I'd never seen were cloudy, like she watched me through a veil. Once I put them on, I saw everything clearly. A kid toppling off a roller coaster, Pop doubling over in his chair, a black eye winking. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy.
Thank you.
Patricia Quintana Bentar is a Western writer from the Port of Los Angeles. Her work has been featured in Wiggly, Smoke Long Quarterly, The Pinch, Fractured Lit, in anthologies including Flash Fiction America, Best Small Fictions, and Best Microfiction. Her book of short fiction, Pardon Me for Moonwalking, will be published by Unsolicited Press in 2025. She lives with a family and unusual dog outside of Oakland, California. Visit Patricia at patriciaqbedar.com.
Thank you. Do you guys know that my heart is still pounding from Cindy's story? It is. I feel like maybe I'm nervous, but I don't think I've ever had to follow Cindy before, and now I guess it's my time. But I have two short flashes to read for you. Hold on a second. 1 second. Ooh. Okay, the first story I wrote in collaboration with two of my favorite writers in the world, Flash writers you may know, Claudia Montpere and Francine Witt. Always wanted to write a collaborative story, and this one I think went over quite well and came out great. It's called Teeth. It was published in Beaver magazine. And again, I wrote it with Claudia and Francine Witt, who's here. It's called Teeth. It sounded sweet when you told me you'd named your teeth. I noted they were all women's names. Mila and Pilar were the showgirls up front. Sophie and Carmen doing Yemen's work of flattening, grinding. I watched them in the restaurant that night as you talked, chewing your paella with shrimp, calamari, clam, squid ink rice. I said I disliked paella, that fish gave me hives. It was my way of keeping you at arm's length. But oh, I wanted to kiss you over our plates and glasses. Silverware softly peeled. Flirtations were murmured. Our first time sleeping together, you said how sexy you found my teeth. You tapped a finger against my incisors and smiled. You divulged your pattern was to fall madly in love, lifting the woman high on a pedestal, but that at 6 months she became humanly, unsalvageably flawed. You ended it then, ready for someone fresh. You added that I shouldn't worry because you were seeing a new therapist. You were an intense listener to my litany of grief. And then, pop, you'd toss me a fact about yourself. You'd never had a cavity. Pop, you'd eaten at 11 of the Michelin 3-star restaurants in the US and planned to visit the rest before you turned 50. We'd go together. I nodded, breathing in your scent, watching your mouth and perfect teeth. Pop, you'd grown up in foster care, but none of the homes really took. I ached then for the little boy you. We were in bed again after the pedestal, but before the crash. Between the pedestal and the floor is held breath and decreased oxygen to the brain. Is beige whispers, is the land of glacier and floating teeth unmoored from mouths. We'd reached the half-year landmark. We stood in a restaurant parking lot, no Michelin stars. It had been raining and water spilled from the eaves. A plastic medicine bottle dropped from your jacket pocket. I bent for the bottle, shook it, and peered inside. An anti-anxiety medicine. My heart flew to yours, an opening into your vulnerability. It was like catnip to a woman like me. You didn't say to stop, but the set of your shoulders told me you were already gone. There we stood under the slowly turning neon sign, cocktails and chops, world's famous dips. It was so quiet I heard the sign's motor. My last sight of you was with red and blue neon sliding across the planes of your unsmiling face. It's been exactly 3 years. I still cry for you, but you hadn't lied. And figured I'd gotten to you at just the right time, after the counselor, the self-knowledge. And you told me about your teeth, the naming of them. I felt that meant something. But you stuck to the schedule, ghosting me then. What an apropos word for that sudden cooling. While I had fallen in love and stayed there. Your calls, never frequent, skated away all misty in Victorian garb. Late at night, I wonder if my voice and teeth have skated from your memory, whether you would know me if we passed at Lake Merritt or outside the Walden Pond bookstore. At those times, pink-nostrilled and prettily sad, I used the tip of my finger to smooth non-existent bite scars on my wrists. I missed them in a way you could only miss something you'd wanted and never received. In the blackness of night, I clamber out of bed to assess my eye teeth and canines. Enrique, Juan, Carlos, Manolo, and Ray. That was teeth. The second one, a little shorter, is called La Señora. I wrote it quite recently, and I wish I could tell you whether it was in a pop-up workshop of Kathy Fish's or Francine Witt's, and it was definitely one of them. Took them kind of back to back. We four kids, oh, it's called La Señora, I think I said that. We four kids bump and rattle in the back seat like beer empties. Hard-footed beach kids, sand coats the floor. We whine for Wiener Schnitzel, demand Jack in the Box and Patone's Pizza and Pioneer Chicken. My brother starts the chant. Stop at the liquor store, stop at the liquor store, stop at the liquor store. And we don't give up. We want Dr. Pepper and candy, Pico sticks and scrunch bars and Laffy Taffy. The urge to be filled, a buffer between us and the neighborhood moms and the popular girls at school. We're all in the back of our mother's terrible Oldsmobile to the secondhand stores we call retarded children's and damn vets. But our hearts are pure. Our mother carries a tape measure in her purse, which is carpeted with loose tobacco and the smell of Wrigley's Doublemint gum. We chat so hard that our mother's cigarette hand shakes. Every window is open to the hot wind. Our little brother, the cutest of us, hangs his head and shoulders out the window, chanting into the hot Los Angeles air, "Liquor store!" Our mother's ashes fly out her window and in ours into our eyes. We laugh and laugh, anything to make her smile. Even alone with us kids, she raises a hand to hide her great teeth. Years later in high school, I'm riding with a friend whose parents gifted her a car. I hunch down when we idle beside my mom's Oldsmobile. You can still see the roof lining hanging down and the strips we yanked while yelling our demands. As a distraction, I rub my friend's arm, ask, "Can we stop for cigarettes and Cokes at the liquor store? I'll pay." To this day, I'm an inveterate check picker-upper. After our father dies, our mother tells us the reason she finally got dentures was because our dad threatened to move to Mexico and abandon her if she didn't. He was halfway packed when a massive stroke took him. He was playing blackjack at the Barona Valley Ranch Casino when it happened. She, across the vast and maze-like gaming floor, playing nickel slots. He deserved happiness, he'd been hollering at her on the ride over. A simple life beside the sea with a sweet senorita, fishing, a striped hammock, a donkey to take him where he wanted to go. Much later, she told me she'd walked past him and the paramedics that day, simply returned to their car, took the scenic ride home with that view of velvety Palomar Mountain. When she got the call from the casino medic, she was enjoying frozen yogurt in the car, air conditioner blasting. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Patricia. Well, I either have a
Thank you,
short
Paul.
list or have left people out. So who was reading? Karen, Bill, Zvi, Andrea, Catherine, Chelsea, Dr. Christina. Well, it's a short one tonight, guys. Thank you all for.
Well, why don't you read? It was your birthday. Who wants to hear Paul read?
Yeah, and you have your new book.
Please
Paul.
read, Paul.
What is
Just
the
give us
connection?
a story from the new book. You know?
Yeah.
Okay, balloons have replaced my flip phone spam. They knocked on my door. I turned the sound up on my TV. They rang the bell again and again. I turned my reading lamp off and muted the sound on my TV, but put the football game on closed caption. I snuck over to my bedroom and peeked out the window and saw a half dozen people holding balloons and a large rectangular sign, which I couldn't read. They began chanting my name and calling me a winner. They had to be the same people who've been spamming me since I lost my job a year ago. The neighbors came out and joined the 6 balloon holders and chanters. I promised my kids I wouldn't fall for any of these false gimmicks again after they chipped in and bailed me out the last time, telling me in no uncertain terms that this was the last bailout. I was tough on them as they grew up, and now they are turning the toughness on me. I can't take a chance on losing their support. So when the balloon-painted van drove on my lawn, blowing its horn, I covered my ears. I decided to call my kids. They would know what to do, but there was no answer from the first 2 kids' houses. And my toughie, Bambi, answered the phone and they asked her what I should do. She told me all excited that I should open the door and wave to them. I thanked her and went to the bathroom and combed my hair, then opened the front door and waved at the balloon people, lifting off above the houses and following the van down the street and around the corner from my house, with my 4-foot check flapping in the breeze. My neighbors rushed over and asked why I didn't open the door sooner, but I couldn't tell them. Then they'd all yelled and told me the balloon people were there to give me a check for $1 million. Go on, I said. That kind of thing doesn't happen to me. One of my neighbors jumped in his car and raced after the balloon people. But before he caught up with the van to tell them I was sleeping, he got pulled over by a cop for speeding and got a hefty ticket, which he handed to me to pay. I knew my kids wouldn't bail me out, so I ripped up the ticket and went back to my ball game and turned the closed caption off and the sound up. It's my birthday story. Does anyone here have a story they'd like to read? Okay. Feel unmute and talk amongst yourselves.